Hi there, it's Eloise Hunter again coming at you from the Durban campus, and welcome to Experiential Learning Lesson 4. We're continuing with our segment on getting the job. So today we'll be focusing on interviews. I'd like you to absorb what to do and what not to do in various interview scenarios. Think about what professional interview behavior constitutes and accept the responsibility to acquire the necessary skills and build an adequate level of confidence that will allow for professional and eloquent responses to interview questions. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to demonstrate basic understanding of the interview process, understand the importance of different types of interviews, understand the role and importance of different types of interview questions, illustrate a basic understanding of general interview etiquette. Through activities in your lecture, you'll develop interview questions for specific media-related positions, role-play the interview scenarios as both the interviewer and interviewee, critically review the interview process by observing classmates participating in mock interviews and present key observations, reflect on your current ability to conduct an interview by asking the best possible questions, as well as be a professional interviewee by giving appropriate answers. So in the previous activity, you chose a media-related vacancy and developed a CV and cover letter on behalf of a celebrity of your choice. As a follow-up activity, you're going to give constructive feedback on your teammates' work, and then one member needs to report back on the process, the feedback, and what was learned in the process. Assuming that lesson 3 was successful and you now know how to put together a very convincing and effective cover letter and CV, you should be able to get yourself an interview. So we're going to work through the theory involved in the interview process. So when you respond to an invitation for an interview, you need to be enthusiastic and professional. Match the tone of the person who contacts you. So this means if they are using exclamation points and smileys, you can do the same. If they keep it very tight and formal, you do the same. And even if you're not sure if you're available for that interview, just respond quickly enough that they know that you are interested, even if you need to confirm the time later on. Be honest about your availability. You don't want to tell them that you're available when you actually do have lectures that day. Due to the vast multitudes of job seekers on the market today, they may need a screening call with you first to narrow down their pool of candidates. So the screening call is just to make sure that you are the person portrayed on your CV and in your cover letter, and it'll give you a little bit of time to ask them questions about the role if you have any that weren't answered by the vacancy advert. This will usually not be with a future colleague, rather somebody from their recruitment, human resources, or talent department. After you've been screened, you may make it onto the next phase of the interview process for a more in-person interview, and this one is something that needs a little bit more preparation than the initial one. It'll usually be your future manager involved in the call and maybe a few other people. So you need to portray enthusiasm and confidence and calm, which will help them to trust that you are the right person for the role. To get your mindset right, remember that your interviewers want you to be the right person for the job. They're not looking for opportunities to trip you up. They're looking for opportunities for you to prove that you are the right person. And really, really do encourage you to do preparation, and I will guide you on what kind of preparation to do for this interview. Start off by having copies of your ID and certifications in case you are having an in-person interview where you need to bring these things along for them to process your application. Read over the job description again and find areas where you can hook your teeth into and say, aha, I can definitely do that, and I will show them that I can do that using this example. Plan logistics to get to the place at the right time. So if you have a friend with a car, ask if you can borrow it and make sure that you rearrange your day so that you have plenty of time to get there, even if there is bad traffic, or if you are having an online interview, make sure that you have enough data to cover it, because usually will require you to have your camera on. Make sure that you do have enough time to log on early so that when everyone else is looking at you, you're calm, collected, and ready. This interview will have various kinds of questions, and you can look at them more in depth on page 31 and 32 of your textbook. So the types of questions are open and closed questions, leading questions, reflective questions, direct and specific questions, behavioral questions, and hypotheticals. Right, and we're going to go more in depth onto the types of questions which are a bit more tricky to answer so that you'll be as prepared as you possibly can be. By engaging in mock interview activities, you're going to prepare yourself in more ways than just answering questions. It's also going to help you to be aware of your body language. Are you sitting in a way that makes you seem anxious, or does it make you seem sloppy? Are you making sure that you understand the question before you answer, or are you just cutting people off and diving in? It also gives you an opportunity to make sure that your responses are sincere and your body language is sincere. And by that I mean, don't laugh, don't fake laugh. People will be able to tell that you're being patronizing, and you don't want that. You need to also be prepared for the idea of an on-the-spot skills test, and don't let that shake your confidence. So that might be a situation in an interview where they say, okay, and now you'll have an opportunity to try and create this or do that or edit this, and then the most important thing is that it doesn't upset you rather than your performance in the task. One of the recommended ways to respond to certain types of questions is using the STAR interview response method. So this is for behavioral questions like, can you tell me about a time when you had to make a difficult decision regarding a colleague? So you'll have to, so this is not different from a hypothetical question. A hypothetical would be, what would you do if? Whereas this is asking you to recall a specific incident. Can you tell me about a time when? All right, so take a moment to think about it. If you have prepared, then you will be ready for this kind of question. You'll describe the situation, explain the task that you had to complete, and describe the action that you took. Lastly, sum it up by explaining the results of your actions. So that's STAR, situation, task, action, result. And most companies recommend that you use this technique. So responding to questions correctly or appropriately is very important, but there are other elements to consider. Your appearance. You need to dress in a way that matches the role you're applying for and err to more formal and polished appearance. Lighting and sound if you're doing an interview online. So make sure that the space that you're in is not a loud coffee shop. Rather buy some data and make sure that you have some time alone somewhere quiet and just a blank wall behind you with a window to cast enough light on your face, rather than a window behind you where your face looks really dark and it's just this blinding light behind you. Be aware of COVID when you go for an in-person interview, and wear a mask that covers your mouth and nose to show not only that you respect them and you care about them, but also to make sure that you don't catch anything while you're there. It would be very embarrassing if for your next interview you have to postpone it because you've caught the Rona. Use their name in the interview. So whoever's interviewing you will introduce themselves at the beginning, and then you need to use the name that they used for themselves. If you use a term like madam or sir, not only are you making assumptions about the way that they'd like to be addressed, but you're ignoring the fact that they've already told you how they would like to be addressed. If you're unsure of pronunciation, it's encouraged that you confirm how to pronounce their name rather than just making an assumption. For instance, my name is Eloise with a silent H, and I do appreciate if people call me that instead of just assuming based on what they read. There are some key things to avoid. Try not to talk about other people or other companies, especially your most recent company, as this indicates to them that you will speak badly about them given the opportunity. Try not to interrupt or speak over the interviewer, and no matter how enthusiastic you are to answer their questions, let them finish. Don't be late. That should be quite obvious. Being early shows that you respect their time and that you will be reliable if you get the job. Don't be annoyed if they ask you a particular question because you were hoping that they wouldn't ask you a hypothetical question. You can have a little chuckle about it and say, oh, okay, I knew you'd ask something like this. Right, let me get to it. But don't go, ugh, I hate the hypotheticals. Don't initiate money talk in this interview. That's not the time. In emails with their human resources, you might want to initiate that, or once you are given an offer. but not now. This is a time for you to understand their company culture, what's expected of you, because you will be given an opportunity for them to ask questions from your interviewers, but it's not time to ask about money. Try not to get distracted by your phone. It should be off or on silent. It shouldn't be buzzing, and you shouldn't be glancing at it. That is extremely inappropriate and disrespectful. On page 43 of Working Professionalism, you'll find some questions which are a little bit more challenging, like when they ask you what your weaknesses are, and they ask you what-if questions. Reflective questions and personal questions can all be difficult to field. Some of them are inappropriate to ask. You don't have to tell the interviewer what your religion is. It should be irrelevant to the job. So the textbook will give you more insight onto how to answer those, or not at all. So to refresh, the flow would usually be that you start off with your application after seeing the job ad with your CV, cover letter, and supporting documents. Then you'll probably have a screening call or a screening email that filters out people who misrepresented themselves in their CV. Then you might have a skills test or your interview. It will vary company to company, and some companies don't give skills tests, but in my experience, it is common practice these days. For instance, for this job, I had to complete a mock lecture in a video call with 2 of the academic heads. In your first interview, you'll have a chance to meet your future colleagues rather than speaking to a recruiter, and you'll make a good impression and have an opportunity to ask them questions about company culture and practice and expectations. Then sometimes there is a subsequent interview, a final interview for shortlisted candidates to really narrow down who's the best for the job. Sometimes the skills test and first interview are enough to establish that. But if there is a subsequent interview, it usually has far trickier questions of behaviorals and hypotheticals. You're not going to get every job you apply for, no matter how perfect you think it is for you. Instead of being upset, just be grateful that your prospective employer saw that you weren't right for the role, because there's nothing worse than arriving at a job and realizing that you feel incompetent and you hate every second there. So accept their rejection as they know best that you wouldn't fit in. And then keep looking, because there is the right role for you. You just need to make sure that you are ready for it when that opportunity comes. If you are given an offer, you might have the opportunity to negotiate a salary or an hourly rate. Be sure that you research what the job pays in your area and at your level. If you're entry level, you're not going to get paid as much as experts in the field. Find out if the company offers benefits like medical aid or a pension fund. These things are fantastic in the long term. It's unlikely that a contract or part-time position will offer such. But if you do have those benefits, be aware that it will reduce the amount of the salary that you take home at the end of the month. So if your cost to company or your gross salary is 30,000 Rand, but you have medical aid or a pension fund, you might only end up taking home 20,000 Rand. Analyze your own personal income needs, because if you accept a role where it costs you more to get transport to and from work than you'll take home at the end of the month, then you need to either negotiate working from home or you need to decline, because that's not sustainable or sensible. If you know that your skills and time are worth more than what's offered, respectfully ask if it's possible to be paid more. This activity is going to help your ability to confidently be interviewed. It would be extremely unhelpful if the first time you had a bad interview experience was in a high-stakes situation where you were actually interviewing for a job. So doing mock interviews gives you an opportunity to understand how you respond under pressure and to give you an idea of the kinds of questions that are asked and how ready you are to answer them. It also will help you to be more aware of things like your body language, which we're not usually aware of when we're speaking person to person. So I encourage you to throw yourself wholeheartedly into this exercise, because it definitely will benefit you once you're into the job market. Have a look at these questions. You may have a chance to answer them in class. If not, it's worth reflecting on them now. Reflection is an important part of your learning journey, and it will help you to not only pass your assessments, but to become a more self-aware person. So understand what part of interviews are scary or difficult, And if you have any strengths, are you charismatic? Do you speak confidently? Do you have a good memory? Are you a good storyteller? Do you have excellent presentation skills where you present yourself in a professional way? And which part of the interview process needs development? Do you need to prepare more? Do you need to make better eye contact? Do you need to prevent yourself from saying like every second word? And how will you use this lesson for your internship? Because that's something that you're going to need in order to pass this module, and I won't have to see you next year. In the next class, you'll present your critical observations from the mock interviews. So this means that you'll have an opportunity to be objective and critical about other people's ability to be interviewed, as well as listen to feedback on your own. And this might be difficult to hear, but it really is helpful to get this kind of feedback in a low stakes situation in class rather than a high stakes situation like an actual job interview. Review the first chapter of Working Professionalism in preparation for the next lesson. The slide deck was based on pages 25 to 44 of your textbook Working Professionalism, with additional resources on the STAR interview response technique and fantastic stock images from nappy.co.